Hi everyone, we'll be getting started in just a few minutes. Thanks, William. I'll give you a heads up as soon as we're ready to start. We're not quite at 50% of registration. I'd like to give it just a couple more minutes. All right, let's get started. Today's presentation is our spring cybersecurity update, hosted by Innovative Computing Systems, and our presenters, Mike Paul, ICS Zone Chief Technology Officer. Our plan today is to cover the most recent cybersecurity threats to law firms, something relatively new on the scene that is the California Consumer Privacy Act, also known as CCPA, a brief discussion about enhancing your firm's information security, and lastly, we'll entertain questions. Please make sure to use the chat window to enter any questions as they come to mind during the presentation, and we'll make sure to address them during the close. The majority of the attendees on today's call know ICS. We're a premier technology integrator and advisor to our law firm clients and have been for over 30 years now. We're actually in year 31. What you may not know, but may be likely to assume, is that in addition to being a leader in helping our clients stay agile and moving our clients to the cloud, and also having been a leading managed support provider for our clients for close to 10 years now, You may also assume that our emphasis is on security. It's likely the most important key ingredient that underpins everything we do. How could it not be to stay in this business, to earn your trust, that will safeguard your data and the data of your clients? Security has got to be our #1 priority. So having said that, let me turn the mic over to Mike Paul and let him give you an overview of where we're at with this spring cybersecurity update. Go ahead, Mike.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Ted, for the introduction. My name is Mike Paul. I'm the CTO at Innovative Computing Systems. It's a pleasure to have everybody here today. As Ted alluded to, we are going to be talking about recent cyber attacks that we've seen on our support desk. We'll be discussing the CCPA, and I have some really good information about that I want to share. And then we'll conclude with some recommended cybersecurity enhancements. So ICS has partnered with a security-focused vendor, and in several of the meetings that I attend with them in their weekly meetings, we frequently have this particular item on the agenda. Cybersecurity is a journey, not a destination. For me, this particularly, I take it to heart in that I look at it and I see it as you can't set a particular technology or a particular security principle in place and forget that it exists. There's a lot of different evolving threats out there, and the thoughts to defend against them evolve as well. And as IT professionals and individuals concerned about our data and protecting who gets it and who has access to it, we have to evolve as well. So this is something with our team we constantly emphasize. Hey, cybersecurity always is evolving, and we always need to adjust our expectations. So cyber attacks on law firms, they have grown over the years, especially the last couple of years, where we wouldn't have too many items on our support desk 10 years ago related to cyber attacks. We definitely have them now. There's always different things that come up in different little ways that show up on the support desk, and we'll go through a few of the bigger ones that we see. But if you are still of the opinion, well, I'm a small law firm, a small business, and I don't really have any important data, I would strongly encourage you to rethink that idea. There are data everywhere that your company possesses, protects, and deals with. And some of the information a cyber attacker, hacker of any kind, will want to use against you and to obtain their goals. Law firms traditionally have been behind the curve on IT spend for security and training. Training is always very important. And law firms have a lot of client data that they need to protect. As you can see here, and you've probably heard on the radio and TV and internet about a lot of hacks that go on. A lot of firms are hacked, and they may not announce it out to the internet. It may be a small business, a small firm that just doesn't really announce that they've been hacked. That tends to happen. Some of these bigger ones you'll see, they show up on the bigger news sources out there. One of the things that we've seen a growth of is as these attacks become more prevalent, clients of law firms have taken notice, and they start to really assess how a law firm protects their client data. So you start seeing security assessments, and clients start making requirements of doing business with law firms. I've personally been involved in 4 or 5 audits this past year where a client has come to a firm and produced a 19 tabbed sheets of 300-400 questions asking the firm not only about their IT security, but about their operations and how they protect things. Does the firm do background checks? Does the firm have a business continuity plan? And as you may know, business continuity plan has pieces of IT in it, but also has a lot of stuff around how the business functions in the event of a failure. So these assessments that come in, you have to spend a lot of time on and respond to, or the firm, the client may choose to take their business elsewhere. And we've actually seen a case of that where a firm did not treat this as seriously as they should have, and the client decided to take their business elsewhere until they got under a proper audit and had all their controls in place. So security assessments have been growing, been involved in a lot of them. There's a lot of different questions that come out. And so with all that said, and all these security assessments coming up, we still find, firms are not really prepared and haven't spent as much time on it. And I mentioned a little earlier about IT security spend for firms usually hovers really low. There's not a lot of spend on it. It's let's put a password on, let's do our backups. And it can't be that way. It can't be just the password anymore. We have to spend time looking at how your operations are run, how the firm handles data, where the data is stored. So I'll go over a couple attacks and things that we've seen on our support desk that come up quite frequently. And you have to spend some time understanding it and knowing how to defend against it. The big ones that we've seen a lot of are phishing, ransomware, and whaling. And frequently, ransomware and whaling are tied into something that happened at the phishing level. And its basic premise of phishing is somebody sends you an email. It looks like a legitimate site. You go to click the link and you put in the password, and you and it's not the real website. It's a spoofed website. And now your password is owned by this nefarious individual out there, and they go look to escalate. And sometimes your user may not open a support ticket with your desk saying, hey, I entered this information incorrectly. So IT may not know about this. And what happens is they start watching the email. They start watching interactions between, that person and who the superiors are, who the partners are, who the accounting people are, who IT is. And at some point, there'll be a discussion or an email of how do I get remote access? The document is sent over to that person. Now the hackers have the document on how to connect remotely. They now get into, Citrix or a remote desktop or a VPN or some method to get in, and they escalate. They look on the system to see if there's some domain admin credentials, somebody with an imaging account that might be on the system, and they escalate from a regular user account to an administrator account on the machine, and they keep escalating. And all of these are jump points for ransomware and whaling. Ransomware being, let's use encryption against IT, and we're going to encrypt a server, and I'm not going to give you the keys to unencrypt it unless you pay a ransom. And we've had one happen this year where the firm got encrypted. We helped them get data back, and it's kind of funny because we thought it would be a large amount of money that the ransomer wanted, but it wasn't a lot of money. It was like $2,500. And we've come to the conclusion that a lot of these people, they don't want it too huge because they want you to pay, and they don't want to get reported to police or authorities or whoever can follow up criminally with that. So frequently, the data, and it may not be, they don't really care what the data is necessarily. They just, I'm going to encrypt the drive and I'm going I'm going to hide it away, and you're not going to have access to it. So ransomware is a big one that happens that starts with phishing and escalates up. And then whaling is another one where let's say you started with phishing and you actually got the CEO or a C-level or a named partner's account, and you send, and they're observing, and they're watching again, and they figure out that there's an accounting department and there's a couple of people in accounting, and accounting, one person underneath the accounting department, and sometime around Christmas or sometime around when bonuses might go out, they'll say, hey, accounting person, can you please purchase gift cards and send me the scratched off information of the PIN? And be quiet about it, don't tell anyone, because this is a secret bonus for everybody. That happened a lot around Christmas. You'd see a lot of that stuff happen. Another example of that is you're getting to a place where you're closing a case, and there's going to be some exchange of money between a client and the firm and opposing counsel or opposing or whatever it is. Some money is going to be exchanged. Well, at that point, they've been watching your inbox, and they intercept the whole transaction, saying, hey, this is a named partner, we've changed our bank a little bit, can you please send it to this bank account instead? Information goes out, the client doesn't realize it, the money gets transacted to that other bank account, and it's not the client's, it's not the law firm, it's not the opposing side, the money's gone. And depending on how good your security partner is, they might be able to help you get it back, but they may not. Depends on how it was sent. So phishing, ransomware, and whaling are big things that happen. So how do you kind of get around that? Training. It really starts with training. It starts with training your assistants, training your partners, training all your users. They're your first line of defense. You can put in as much technology as you want, and they'll mitigate a lot of different things. But if the assistant gives the password away and is not able to recognize that the email is a bogus email, you're going to have a hard time keeping your data safe. So, and I'll talk about this a little bit at the end, but a lot of these audits that you get from insurance companies like doing cyber insurance, or clients doing their security audits, they'll ask about, are you doing security training? So with that said, I'm going to transition a little bit over to CCPA. CCPA is this California Consumer Privacy Act. It is a law designed to protect consumer privacy relating to companies operating within California. It doesn't matter if your company is based in Nevada. If you do a lot of work with California residents, this will affect you. So you could be anywhere in the country, and if you're doing a lot of stuff with California, you may fall under the CCPA. As I'm saying this, please understand, we're not a law firm. Consult your legal professional on exactly how this applies. This CCPA is relatively new, so there's some ambiguity that still exists on how it applies. I got a lot of information from again, our third-party security vendor had us go to this website. We'll have it in the links. It's called Secure the Village. There's a 3-part series about the CCPA. And if you've watched nothing but the first hour, I highly recommend it. Again, we'll send you links. But it has a webinar with 3 attorneys, an insurance company representative, and then the security vendor. Great watch. I would highly recommend that. Goes in much more depth than we have time for. So just the first question that everyone always has is, does it apply to me? Does the CCPA really apply to me and how we do things? So we've got a couple things in here that, when we look at this and we did our analysis, and if you're collecting personal data of California residents, okay, that's first part. And then if you have over 25 million, if you are collecting 50,000 or more consumers, households, or devices. And here comes a little ambiguity. Is one consumer and they have 3 devices, so does that mean 4? It doesn't necessarily, get into that as far as what I've seen in the CCPA. So, you have questions. And then earn more than half of your annual revenue from selling consumers' personal information. The other thing to note about this, and we've seen a couple of things that we were a little not clear about. When you look at these items that are required, these are ORs. So it's California personal data, and if you have 25 million or 50,000 or more consumers, household, and devices, or half of the annual revenue. Again, consult your legal professional. But we've seen a couple things. I've had my security vendor tell us, one type of interpretation of that, and then I've also seen where it says or. So I think it's really important that you consult your legal professional, talk to them about, does this really apply to you? The other thing as far as IT goes that I've had to do with our own internal operations is just really understand where the data is being used and how it's being used. IT may not always know, hey, the website is collecting, personal consumer information. You may not know. I mean, you may not look at that all the time. So you need to understand, hey, the marketing department sends out, an email to, 100,000 people once a quarter. Well, if you don't start asking questions and start classifying your data, you're never going to know that is happening. So it's important to, from the IT perspective, to really know where your data is at, what's contained within the data, and how it's being used. So the CCPA, of course, has some exceptions, mainly relate to HIPAA. If you're already operating under HIPAA, there's some exceptions related to that. There's some exceptions relating to any regulatory investigation. And the interesting one to me is the last one here. My company cooperates with law enforcement agencies and defends legal claims that are contrary to CCPA. I can see a bunch of our legal clients, might fit somewhere in that range. I don't know. So that's the one that's interesting to me as far as what the exceptions are. So the privacy rights, there'll be 2 slides here. There's, what privacy, what it's considering the privacy to be. You can just go read through these, but I think that's a little waste of time. What I'd like to do is just mention a couple of these things is how it relates to your software. So like the right to be forgotten, very interesting idea. You want to, as a consumer, say, I don't want to be remembered by this company at all. Well, in practical purposes, how does a company that has a CRM package or a case management package implement such a thing? How do you actually get into the software and say, well, I want to forget this. I want to be able to forget this. What do I have to do? It may involve talking to your vendor and going, hey, do you guys have CCPA type things in here that I can implement on the next version? Maybe you have to go hunt for another vendor to help you identify the risks within the firm. I think that's all kind of stuff within the operations of your software and the IT packages that you're using, of how do you actually put something in place like to be forgotten, the right to be forgotten. The other interesting thing, and this is to me makes sense, you're not supposed to punish anyone if they decide to opt out or opt in. Same services regardless of whether they made that choice. And then up in the upper corner here, we got a sample from the California Attorney General Office on if you are actually collecting data, sample verbiage on how to put this on your website. To do I sell my personal information? Do I not sell my personal information? I really like that there's some samples out there that you can look at and kind of understand how that works with your website. So again, CCPA, I really recommend that webinar. They get into an hour long. It's three items. You can get in much more depth than I can get here. And we'll send links, of course, at the end. So the final thing we'll talk about is some cybersecurity tips. This is gleaned from our own staff, from our security vendor, from newsletters, websites, a lot of different things we see. We put together and kind of talk about the things that we see that we think would have the most impact. So first one, and I touched on it a little briefly, is annual or quarterly security training. I've seen it in every single audit I've done coming from a client. They ask, are you doing annual security training? And if you're not, you can't answer yes to that. You have problems with answering that question and addressing it. So one of the things you can do is, there's lots of different ways to deliver this content, webinars, bringing in a security vendor, different ways to do it. I know for one that we did this last year, and ICS doesn't really do the security training, so we'd outsource that if we were to bring that in. But one of the things that I witnessed when I was doing with the training with one of the firms we had, they actually did MCLE credit. So they drove attorneys to come into the security training and get credit for the MCLE. I thought that was a really clever way to help people drive in. And you're spending maybe an hour and a half, and then maybe some follow-up webinars throughout the year that you have a security training program in place. And the content of those are related to how to spot an email that's a bogus email. I mean, that's a lot of what it is being able to confidently go, okay, that's a bogus email. I know that's not real. CCPA website disclaimer. So one of the things that we saw at ICS at the beginning of the year when the CCP came in, I was going to a lot of different vendor websites, and almost on all the sites I was going to, they had a disclaimer: CCPA, we're doing this with your cookies, we're doing this with your information, and giving us information about how they're tracking our data, the data that I was putting in there. And ICS doesn't necessarily capture client data to sell. It's for marketing reasons, but we looked at our disclaimer, and I looked at CCPA and how it applies to us and if it would apply to us. And we thought, well, we don't really think we fit in with the CCPA as far as everything that goes there, but there's a risk. The fact we operate in California, the fact that the CCPA now exists, the fact that there's not a lot of case law and the law is still kind of a little ambiguous on some of the interpretations of it, that we thought it would be a really low risk move if we put CCPA a website disclaimer on our website. We thought it was a low risk move. We thought it gets us to a step of, if anyone ever challenges us on it, we have it up there already. We have some steps moving forward towards it. 2FA. This is a big thing that helps prevent phishing. If you have two-factor authentication enabled, if the hacker has that password, they can't just log in anywhere. They have to use a token. It's really important that you look to use two-factor. ICS internally, we use two-factor everywhere. I've got it locked down on Mimecast, on Office 365, on our workspaces. We've got it, our cloud provider. We've got it all sorts of places where we have enabled two-factor on our servers. You can't log into our servers without two-factor authentication prompting you. We happen to like a particular software vendor, Cisco Duo 2FA, but there's a lot of different vendors out there that have 2FA available to you. One of the things I'd like to mention is about SMS. SMS, while very convenient and ubiquitous everywhere, and everyone does do an SMS to the phone, it's not the most secure method of 2FA implementation you could ever have. There are state-sponsored telecoms for countries that aren't friendly to us that have access to the SMS network. There's also an attack called SIM swapping, where someone will call into your phone provider and be able to impersonate you enough that the phone provider allows them to change the SIM to their SIM on a phone, and now you've got SMS messages going to that phone instead of yours. So we recommend either hard tokens or a token that's on a smartphone that you have to like approve or see. Again, the Cisco Duo 2FA we like. Microsoft Authenticator has a good product. Google Authenticator, a little long in the tooth, but still works. And there's other vendors. There's a lot of other vendors out there that can fit your needs. Vendor risk management. This is another big one. I highly recommend that that all firms start doing. This is basically the idea that any vendor that does any business with the firm, with the company, you go through a checklist of sorts where you identify potential risks of doing business with that firm. It doesn't say you still can't do business with the firm, but you run through the checklist, you look at it, you analyze it a little bit. I'll tell you again, on all the audits that I've been seeing, vendor risk management program is a question. It shows up frequently. So thinking about vendor risk management form, and it could be as simple as a spreadsheet, or they have, and I've seen them, platforms doing vendor risk management. It's a website, you log in and you manage it from one central console. It's pretty easy. Patching. I started in IT 20 plus years ago, and patching, you would do when you did major maintenance, but you wouldn't go out of band and do it all the time. That has changed. Patching needs to be done on a regular cadence. It needs to be done monthly if possible. You need to be able to have some sort of testing for patching and all this stuff, but you can't leave patching undone. A lot of the vulnerabilities, especially related to escalation of permissions, can relate to a patch that Microsoft or whatever vendor has put out 6 months ago, and you just didn't apply the patch. The other kind of part with patching that you want to tie into it is that if you do patching, you want to test that the patches have been applied successfully. So you run a vulnerability scan. Again, there's a lot of vendors for this. We happen to use Nessus for the own internal ICS network. We run a Nessus scan every week. I have my team review it. I'm not saying you have to run your Nessus scan or vulnerability scan once a week, once a month after you do your patch cycle. It'll point out things that maybe the team missed, or things that aren't necessarily related to Windows patching. I mean, it could point out the fact that you have printers with SNMP turned on, and you don't really need SNMP at all. It can point out things, some firmware for your firewall that's old. Okay. And it identifies these things. Usually when you go through them the first time, it takes a little while to get through the list, but it's really one of your best friends to validate your patching. You can outsource it. You can have someone run it internal. There's a lot of different ways to do the validation of the patching, but it's really important to do the patching and then to validate the patching happens successfully. And then the final thing is we have 31 tips to secure your personal and law firm technology. There's a blog. We'll link to it. William helps curate that content. Thank you, William. And there's a lot of different stuff on there that I think is very helpful. So that's the end of that. We'll go to questions, and hopefully I left some time. Any questions? William, anything that we look at?
No, it looks like we're good to go. Thank you,
Okay.
everyone.
Okay, thank you, everybody, and have a nice rest of the day. Thank you again.